I'd like to just quickly set up what we're going to do here, mainly by letting you know whose idea this was, which is it's my fault. And what the purpose of it is, and then to go into the actual interview session. How many people have seen Jay Leno's street interviews back whenever he was doing that? Yeah. So this kind of has a feel kind of like that, but what in the world does Jay Leno have to do with this session, and in particular with the method or form of the session? As you know, probably this conference is dedicated to exploring in a particular way relationship education, what it means for one to talk about a Catholic worldview or the Catholic intellectual tradition. And for about the last 2 years, and I've only been in Vancouver for about 2.5 years or so, for the last 2 years I've spent a lot of time working through continuing education and other venues to try to, in some sense, spread the good news of the Catholic intellectual tradition. And I've done that in various different venues, various different formats, most of them fairly academic, seminars, symposia, lectures, so on. So when I was asked to envision a session today, what I wanted to do was precisely to avoid giving the kind of presentation that I did in the past. First of all, because some of you have been there, and so I didn't want to give you a repeat. But second of all, because what I want to avoid is defining Catholic worldview or Catholic intellectual tradition in advance of understanding it at a more particular, and certainly for educators at a more level of practice. And so what we have are a collection of colleagues within the Catholic school system here in Vancouver who are going to share with you and with us and with me really just thoughts about how their work is conceived of by them as being Catholic and how they see themselves as Catholics in that work. So the conversation is probably to their own anxiety, not very scripted. We've had some meetings, some focus groups. There were actually many volunteers who came together and been thinking through this. But what you're going to get a window into is not a prepared final statement for you to take down and implement immediately, but really to invite you to join us in a conversation about what it is that these words, Catholic worldview, Catholic intellectual tradition, this idea of bringing Catholicism into Catholic schools, although at some level it seems obvious, what that's about. So I'd like you to join me in thanking and welcoming your colleagues here. And we'll call it the first one. They're all shaking their heads up. Why did I do this? Yeah. Good morning.
Good morning, Sam.
Mind sharing your name?
I am Susan Sousa.
And where do you work?
Holy Cross Regional High. We're down in Surrey.
Okay. Hey. What do you do there?
I teach English, Christian education, and I'm the Christian education department head.
Are you allowed to do all those things at once?
I try.
Okay. All right. Cool. I didn't know that. That's good. So how do you see all of that as being Catholic?
I get to share my faith no matter what course I'm teaching, but as department head, I've taken advantage of being able to invite our non-Catholic students into the Catholic school system by offering them an introduction to Catholicism the very first day of school. Because can you imagine being Sikh, Hindu, non-Catholic, and being one of 800 children walking into a Catholic church and having never been there before? So I introduced them to how to make the sign of the cross, how to put a hand over your heart to receive communion, so you're not left in the pews with everybody else. I take them on a tour of the church, teach them our sacred places, our sacred movements, and try and give them a bit of meaning behind that, what it means for us, and invite them to join us.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, could you say a little bit more, though, about this idea of a Catholic worldview for people who may not have that worldview? Is there any tension in that at all?
Teaching people that Catholic means universal. And just because you don't share my faith, let's look for what we do have in common. Can you believe in God? Can you honor that? Can you respect me for being a person of faith?
Sure.
Can you join in my greater community with respect and an openness? And in return, I offer you respect for your difference of my faith. but invite you to journey with me.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you.
Who's next?
Name, please.
My name's Rob Kirkham, and I work at OLPH on the west side. Go Eagles. That proves they're here.
Okay, good. And what do you do there?
I teach grade 7.
Teach grade 7. What does that involve exactly?
Math, social, no, it's, I teach all the general subjects, with the exception of a few.
Okay. And how do you see that work as being Catholic?
Well, what we talked about, I think establishing a culture of truth in the classroom, that they're not afraid to ask anything, because grade 7s have a lot of very intense questions, if they're allowed to ask them, and not be afraid about sounding dumb or getting in trouble for asking things that might, they don't know the answer to, but they've always wanted to ask, but they're not sure if they're allowed to ask. So removing that fear and allowing them to feel comfortable that whatever they ask, we can explore it together in where I might not even know the answer, and that's okay too.
Yeah. When I think of a view, though, I kind of think of like clarity of a certain kind. So what does it mean to ask questions as a way to come about a view? Is this a blurry view, or what kind of view is the one brought about through questions, you think?
Well, I think asking questions is super powerful, and I mean, our faith is founded on mysteries. They're not founded on facts, so you can't expect a solid answer. So I don't know if the answer, the view is necessarily blurry, but it's one, I guess you're slowly washing away the blurriness over time with a Windex of answers, I suppose, but
Revelation is Windex, you heard it here. That's great. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah. So you know the drill.
I'm Michael Sorley. I'm from St. Jude's School in Vancouver.
And you wore your name. And you wore your name tag on stage.
I forgot to take it off.
That's okay. Do you wear it in the restaurants?
Put it under the jacket.
Under the jacket. That's a good technique. Yeah. Great. So what do you do at St. Jude's?
I'm an SCA,
What does that mean?
Special Education Assistant.
What does that mean?
I deal with children with special needs or small groups that the teacher thinks need extra help.
Okay.
That kind of thing.
How do you see that as that work as being Catholic?
Well, in my position, I often work one-on-one with students or sometimes in a small group, and I think that makes it more comfortable for them to ask questions. So they'll dive into deeper questions. It doesn't necessarily have to be about religion. The other day I was helping a student with social studies, and they were learning about government. And so inevitably, he asked where the government where does government get its authority from? And I was able to bring in the example that is in Scripture. Christ is speaking to Pilate, and Pilate confronts him, and our Lord says that he would have no authority if it were not given to him from above. And so the student was very interested to find out that all authority, whether it's a teacher's authority or a parent's authority or government's authority, comes from God.
Wow, that's awesome. That's a great example. Thank you so much. So now you know that all the authority I have up here comes from God. So hi, what's your name?
I'm Patricia Ronci. I work at St. Matthew's Elementary School.
And what do you do there?
I'm school secretary.
Wonderful. How do you see being school secretary as being Catholic?
Well,
Is there a difference between a Catholic school secretary and a school secretary?
I think we're a beacon of hope.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. To staff members, to children in the school, but more so even to new people coming into the school or calling home. I had a family a while ago, 4 children wanted to come into a Catholic school, and we didn't have room for 4 children, we only had room for 3. And the little one was really sad. Yeah, and but the mother sent the other 3, and he just looked at me in tears and he said, "You really can't take me?" And I couldn't do it. And I looked at him and I looked at his mom and I said, "You need to go home and you
I picked doubles. That's not fair, is it? What's wrong with that guy? So what do you do there?
I am a special education assistant as well.
Okay, and maybe you could help me. I don't know if I understood what it meant the first time.
In a nutshell, what I do is I help kids work towards their dreams. I try to teach them tenacity of work ethic to get there. So you want to learn how to be a pilot, well, you're going to have to learn how to tell time. And you're probably going to have to learn how to interact with people and talk to them and talk on the radio and speak clearly. So you want to give a dream to be a pilot?
Sure.
I'm your woman.
So what is dreaming of being a pilot? How do you see that as Catholic? Are there Catholic airlines out there? I'm just not aware of any prop dusting.
If you gave my student the opportunity, he would totally have created it for you by now. But I think more what I do is I try to show my students they matter, that they always have this board, they always have someone in their corner. And it's not me, it's Jesus, because I fail. I fail to be a good educator, I fail to look my path. I fail to follow the IEP sometimes. I fail. But God's not going to fail them, and He's going to guide them and love them, and He's going to guide me to guide them.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I didn't know this was going to turn into confessions, but... So, name?
Good morning, Sam. I'm Danielle Kozak. I'm from St. Augustine.
So what do you do in St. Augustine?
I'm a phys ed teacher.
Phys ed teacher.
Phys ed. Yay, phys ed teachers.
Yeah. And so how do you see phys ed as a phys ed teacher? How do you see that work as being Catholic?
Well, I think in all of our schools, phys ed is part of creating the whole person, developing them. And I know Catholic schools, I see excellence in the arts, the academics, and definitely in the athletics. Yeah.
Great. I mean, this is interesting. I mean, so would you say that there's a room to think of athletics itself as a particularly kind of Catholic endeavor? Is that the idea?
Well, respect for the human body is absolutely Catholic.
Okay.
Reverence for life. And so looking after our bodies, learning how to take care of our bodies and take care of others in body, mind, and spirit is essential to our faith. Absolutely.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Yeah. Hello.
I don't have a school.
Wait, you don't have a school?
No, I don't get the cheers. Everyone got cheers.
Well, who are you?
I'm Nesha Bolsvich, and I'm an associate superintendent for our wonderful 46 Catholic schools.
What? Oh, so you have now all schools.
Did you hear the cheers?
I did hear the cheers, yeah. So what does that mean, though, exactly? What do you do?
Well, yeah, what is it that I do? As an associate superintendent, my particular portfolio is human resources, and particularly supporting in the world of human resources, principals, pastors, PECs, teachers, all people who somehow are human.
Okay. Somehow. Okay.
I support you too.
Thank you. Okay, great. So how do you see that work as being Catholic?
Well, I think probably one of the most significant things that I have the privilege and honor to be able to do is to meet and approve applicants who are wanting to be teachers in our schools. So anybody who wants to be on a contract, at some point we get a chance to meet each other. And it's through that process that I think is actually quite sacred, to be honest with you. I have a real opportunity to engage in some thoughtful questioning in regards to people's hopes and dreams and wanting to be educators, the why behind that, and also their faith stories. And to me, it's a beginning of a relationship. And I as an example, yesterday, not just at the social, at the happy hour, but
I have no idea what the socials are
yeah, you
about.
did a great job, by the way. Someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, remember I told you when we were meeting that I was going to this special event? Well, I want to let you know I auditioned and I got in." And I thought, how privileged it is for them to share their story with me personally. And the opportunity to kind of have a touch point through all of our schools is pretty special. So the fact that I can have that window of being the ambassador ambassador of who our schools are for students in our schools is very important to me, and it's the beginning of a relationship between not just myself, but the system and who Jesus is for our kids. So that's really sacred.
Thank you so much.
You're
Yeah, that's
welcome.
great. Sorry, I'm checking the time. It's rude to check the time, isn't it? In a conversation. I just want to make sure you all get to lunch on time. Don't present. Hello. And your name?
Carolyn Smiley.
Great. And where do you work?
I work at St. Jude's.
St.
in
Jude's.
Vancouver.
Great.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So, what do you do there?
I teach grade 3.
Grade 3. What's that like?
It's with all the snow, it's been a little bit fun to stay indoors and do a lot of playing games on the carpet.
Oh, I bet that's a blast.
Yeah, so much fun.
Okay. So how do you see, being, cooped up indoors as being Catholic?
Well, I think one of the coolest things about being Catholic is that we have this amazing faith community and this rich history that goes not only us, but includes all these communion of saints that came before us. So I encourage my students to do a lot of work with learning about saints and learning about their stories. And so during indoor time, they are like, oh, can we take out the saints books? I'm like, okay, I guess. Just be careful. But yeah, they just love reading about saints.
But isn't that true? Like,
lives.
saints are kind of crazy people, aren't they?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
actually cool. Okay.
So like they like doing like every little thing about the saints, and so they always come to me asking questions. Like, oh, St. Francis of Assisi, he was Italian, so did you like pizza or spaghetti? Just like, I don't know. So
Sure.
that's the point where I started saying, I
I
don't
think he ate
know.
lunch, actually.
Yeah,
he was
he
like
ate berries, I don't know, sticks.
Great.
I was like, I don't know, why don't you ask him when you get to heaven?
Sure. Oh, wow.
Yeah. So they turn that around on me now, and every time I don't know something, they're like, well, you should ask when you get to heaven, Miss Smiley. Okay.
That's great. Well, thank you so much. Yeah. Oh my gosh, we have a priest now.
Before you ask me any questions, I just want to say how I got here. First of all, my name is Richard Zanotti. I'm from Our Lady of Sorrows. I was born in 1953 to Italian immigrants in Windsor, Ontario, but that's too far back. A couple of weeks ago, Sandy Marshall got in touch with me and asked me to come to a meeting. And when Sandy Marshall talks, everybody listens, right? So, they chose a very Catholic venue to have a meeting. I think it's the Hound and Wolf or Wolf and Hound pub. So we went there, and there were quite a few people, and they told me, well, we're only going to choose a few of you to actually talk. And so I thought to myself, I said, oh, that's great. I'll get a free hamburger and a beer, and I won't have to do anything.
I think you shepherd's pie, actually.
So
Actually true.
well, he's good. So anyhow,
2 beers, I think.
I looked around, and I was the only priest there. I said, there goes my theory. So anyhow, what's your question?
Oh, we can start thinking, Father.
No, I just wanted to share a little bit of attention that I have as a priest, and that is I'm to be an administrator of a community, of a parish and a school. And I guess that's, what I need to be as a pastor. Administrator, minister, But sometimes my administrative capacity or responsibilities overburden me and they don't allow me to be a pastor, Pastor, shepherds, protect, guide, keep the community united, but also to listen and to console, So sometimes I feel kind of that tension there. And I think as a Catholic priest, I think I need to be compassionate, I need to listen. I need to allow people to feel part of the community that the parish and the school is.
Can I ask you possibly a dumb question?
No question is dumb.
Oh.
You should know that. The teachers know.
Fair enough. Okay, all right. I'll ask you a not dumb question. is it sort of silly to ask a priest how they see their work as being Catholic, or is there any potential meaning in doing that? I mean, it's kind of like asking, like, you know, my shoes, whether they, like, what shoe strings are about, or that's a really bad analogy.
Well, when we say, are you really Catholic? It's like, are you really Orthodox, you know?
But I thought those were Greek.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that to be Catholic means, you know, living a relationship with the Lord. And that somehow, in living that relationship, like I have friends, and I like to tell other people about my friends. I like other people to meet my friends. I like friends to meet other friends. And so maybe that's what it means being Catholic, you know? I have a really good friend, his name is Jesus. You want to know him? You want to meet him?
I do.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Father. All right. I felt really small. It was really cool, actually. Yeah. Do you guys know the story of St. Francis whenever he finally figured out? I'll get to it in a second.
No rush.
So the first call from God, Francis was, I think, going to war or something, and God said, rebuild my church. So he went and got to work, you know, fixing the chapel. And after about 2 years, God came back and was like, no, not the church, like rebuild my church. And he's like, oh, that church, okay. So he presents himself to, I think, to the bishop, and he gets naked, because Francis was all about getting naked, right? He really was. No, this is a real thing. And presents himself, and so the bishop, seeing, you know, this, by all accounts, Francis wasn't like a model guy who was in front of the bishop. He covers him, in some sense, to save embarrassment, and everyone saw this and recognized the bishop's mantle as a sign. So whenever I was there under the I kind of felt like safer. Not like, that's awkward. Never mind. Yeah, all right. So, your name?
Kevin Smith.
Kevin Smith, and what do you do?
I'm principal of Holy Trinity Elementary in North Vancouver.
Okay. Did you make him do that?
I did.
Yeah? So, I mean, what is, like, my experiences with principals were mixed in my opinion. I mean, what do you do as a principal besides being
Well,
scary?
I know the thing is, the funny thing is, it is part of the office, I'm afraid. I am not scary, as you can well imagine, looking at me despite, you know, my pencil neck. I am not a frightening, imposing figure, but there is truth to the fact that, and you can't forget it, when kids come into your office, even if it's the best thing, they are frightened, and it's just something about that horrible office. But, you know, the last thing I want to be is scary. And I think when that question came up, it's not an easy question for me to answer.
Well, which question?
About what it means, about what's Catholic, about how I feel my work as being Catholic, and scary doesn't come to mind right away.
Good. What does come to mind?
Well, it's a strange thing. Prepare yourself. You know what? Regularly at my school, especially during the wintertime, it seems lately, kids will just come into the office, and they will often bypass the office secretary. They can see me as they come in. My office is well situated that I can be seen, and the door is usually open. And they will bypass, whether they are little, primaries or grade 7 students, and they'll just come right into my office. They'll just come right in. And often what they're coming for is they will come to tell me that someone has thrown up, or that there's pee on the floor in the boys' bathroom. And they're not coming to tell me so I can call the maintenance person, because I am the maintenance person. So I am the guy, and you can ask anybody in the school, I'm the guy that cleans up puke. And as odd and funny as that might be, it's actually quite fantastic for me, and I didn't design it this way.
Are you some kind of Mother Teresa?
No, I'm not. No, because I'm not Mother Teresa, because I resent the children. While I clean up their vomit, internally, I am thinking, really? Like you didn't even feel a little hint? At no point you could have got to at least the wastebasket. As I'm mopping urine, I think, honestly, this is not just an accident. someone is having fun, and I'm not. But on a deeper level, though, to be honest, what I like is that they don't think that I'm beyond cleaning up their pew. And I mean that. They don't think that. They don't think that they don't think I'm too good for that, because I'm not. I don't like it that they throw it up on the floor, but they don't think that. They think that I should do whatever I need to do.
And how is that Catholic?
Because I think we're called to do whatever we need to do to show God's love. I think we're called wherever we are. And I think that's what the people in this room do. They're called wherever they're at. They're not just the grade 5 teacher, or the kindergarten teacher, or educational aide, or secretary. They're called to do whatever we need to do as a community to help the community. And if that means you're cleaning up vomit, you're cleaning up vomit.
Great, that's a great ending. Yeah, thank you. This is good. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Kayla. What's your name again? Sam, hi. Well, there's a lot of people here. Kevin is my boss, and he's the best boss ever. He's more like a dad, actually, and he's there for everybody in our community. Anyways, I don't know what I'm doing up here.
Did he tell you to do this?
No! Whoa,
So
I mean,
tell us
I'm
about
TV
yourself.
over there. Oh,
What
okay.
do you do?
So I teach French. It's the language of love. And anyways, what I was going to
You're
say...
very It's very French in a way. Sorry, Michelle, I'm so sorry. Okay. And how do you see teaching French as being Catholic?
Well, actually, what I was going to say is, you know, there's so many young people married at a young age. Don't you think everyone who's like in the Catholic system gets married so young? I'm kind of wondering, where are all the men?
Oh?
Where are they?
Are they not? Okay, all the men stand up. Come on. Oh, I see what she's doing now. I just fell into it. Everything was so many.
Not just me, but all of the single ladies out there as well. Thank you. No more questions.
Thank you. Some of you right now are thinking like, oh wow, that was like really awkwardly planned and well poorly executed and stuff, but it actually wasn't planned at all. That's good. But I think all of these stories show that the daily mess of our lives, and some messes more graphic than others, our desires, our fears, our passions, our hopes, that they're related in some very abstract, at least at this point, abstract way, to whatever these words, Catholic intellectual tradition, Catholic worldview, mean or are, or whatever it is they signify or refer to. And I'd just like to briefly, perhaps, think aloud a bit on these words as more than words. Because, by the way, how many people are aware that within pretty much all gamuts of formal schooling, there's a kind of bureaucratic lingo that emerges and comes around every few years? Everyone knows this? Right? Like, what are some of the, you'll hear a keyword that's like on some policy document, and then it makes itself into a meeting, and then it makes itself into your lesson plans, and then, and the danger of these words is that even if they're great words, they can become empty verbalism, right? And so I spend a lot of time talking about this thing called the Catholic intellectual tradition, or this thing called the Catholic worldview. But the biggest danger is overusing those words and those terms, because it's actually not about a title. It's not about even Catholicism itself isn't just a really nice brand. It's not a genre. And so it's important, I think, for us to see in the testimonies of your own colleagues the ways in which they're making sense of these terms or these ideas attached to these terms already in their daily lives. How many people here are baptized? Okay. No, if you're not, that's okay, by the way. I'm not trying to feel you out. But if you are baptized, you already have a very concrete, sacramental, theological participation within this thing called the Catholic intellectual tradition. You are priests and prophets as a result of your baptism. And as teachers, you carry out, well, not just teachers, by the way, principals to staff, all sorts of things. You live out your baptism, and by living out your baptism, you are always already immersed within the Catholic intellectual tradition. You are always already within a context that requires and has and is operating through a Catholic worldview. So whenever we emphasize these terms, I worry sometimes that they can come off as if like, okay, I know we say we're Catholic, but you got to realize and wake up that, you got to start hitting the books and read Augustine and Aquinas and Scotus and John Paul II and the encyclicals and stuff, because if you're not, like, no Catholic worldview for you or your students, and everything will go bad. Well, there's nothing bad about reading encyclicals or Aquinas or Augustine, these things. But there is something, in my mind, deeply miseducative and possibly harmful if you're not able to realize that you are already within a tradition. We all here, as a virtue of this conference, share a school. Not just a school in terms of a place or a set of schools, but a school of thought. A school of thought that has some basic principles and some basic ideas that whether you can rehearse them in an essay or an exam, or whether you can be super conscious of them all the time, we all generally, uncontroversially even, as Alan put it, almost unconsciously believe in some of these things. These beliefs that constitute what it is we might call a Catholic worldview do not just change the way we educate, they change the very meaning of education itself. It's my claim that education conceived of through a Catholic worldview is, in some cases, not only something different, but even in some cases, something countercultural in these times. At the same time, I'll get to the countercultural part, you might be shocked to know that a great deal of what we traditionally mainstream, institutionally understand as education, and not necessarily within a Catholic environment, is immersed in Catholic ideas and thinkers and people. I teach at UBC. I teach in a secular environment, and I'm very comfortable there, very happy there. I don't feel persecuted or any of those things. But I do notice that a great deal of the language we use within educational theory, for instance, is almost always already religious language. For instance, one of the oldest words for education that's been contemplated throughout theorists is the word Bildung. You guys know, who's heard of the word Bildung? It sounds kind of like dung, so it's not nice, but it's German. Bildung is this idea about education as formation, right? And Bildung was coined, the word Bildung, by a somewhat controversial theologian named Meister Eckhart, trying to understand what it is to be constituted as a human person. Now that word is at basically just about every symposia and conference within the academy trying to figure out what education is. Another example, social justice. Who's heard of the word social justice? You'll probably know that these words are not exclusive to a Catholic conversation. In fact, right now, almost every single department in faculty of education, not only in Canada, but across the English-speaking world, is trying to use that as something of a brand for a particular kind of socially conscious, political, you might say, education. Well, social justice is a term coined by the Society of Jesus in the 1840s. And I think a lot of us Catholics realize that it's not a new set of terms. And I think that the way we work through the ideas of social justice as Catholics really matter, not just for us, but also for the world at large, thinking about those things. Another term that gets, another source is a source that's used a lot of times in teacher education preparation programs, including at UBC, but also at other places. An author by the name of Paulo Freire. Has anyone here heard of Paulo Freire, a Brazilian? Some of you probably have. Maybe you had to read like chapter 2 on the basic concepts of education in your teacher training. Paulo Freire is a Brazilian philosopher of education, very famous, and in many cases is cited as the founder of critical pedagogy, a particular approach to thinking about education. Paulo Freire was a devout Catholic his entire life. And if you read Pedagogy of the Press, you will find encyclicals in the footnotes. Now, the reason I'm sharing this with you is not to give you some nice, cool facts. It's to show you that both from the inside, as you've heard, a Catholic worldview is in full operation. But also, I don't want, when I get to the countercultural part, for it to seem as if we're all fortressed here within this idea of a Catholic worldview and it has no interfacing and no interaction with the world out there. The field of education as an academic field, the profession of education as a profession, as it's taught and secured through major institutions and universities, the university itself, Catholic Convention, by the way, is already also immersed, many times unconsciously in a different sense of the word unconscious, within a set of Catholic terms, a set of Catholic ideas. And in many cases, pointing that out, I don't think is bad. Of course, things change, they evolve, maybe they lose some parts of doing others. But from the inside to the outside, there's a ubiquity, a totalness of a kind of religious sense that we find in the Catholic worldview. Now, here's where it gets countercultural, though. So I think. When we think of education, one of the first terms that comes up, even in a Google search, is the word learning. And when we think of learning, we tend to think of knowledge. And when we think of learning and knowledge and education, we think of all the stuff that one, I suppose, should think of, which is what we know, and what we know as a result of our education. And so whenever a child comes home after school, an obvious question is, what did you learn today? Right? It's not crazy to ask. But how many times do we ask them, who did you become today? Who are you becoming this week at school? One of the most fundamental aspects of a Catholic worldview with respect to education is that it's not principally a question of the acquisition of knowledge. It's principally a question of the constitution of the soul. It's about becoming a person. And so being matters not as much, but far more than learning or knowledge. Now, those things might help us to become, but education conceived through a Catholic worldview cannot reduce itself to mere learning or to knowledge. And it cannot reduce the human person to a cognitive or behavioral or psychological entity. The Catholic worldview, which is something that we already share, and I don't think I'm saying this from nowhere, is a view in which the human person, our students, their families, has a soul and is a spiritual being. And where what is at stake is not just our career path, and is not just our economic situation or our political situation, but is ultimately our becoming human persons. This is fairly obvious sometimes in medicine. We tend to get really, like, when I go to parties and people ask me what I do, it's always very embarrassing because no one really knows what to say when you say you're a philosopher. So I try usually to say other things. You know. But I don't always lie, but I substitute things. But sometimes I wish I could just to see the reaction, tell them that, I'm a brain surgeon. Why is it, I wonder, that there's this kind of like, whoa, brain surgeon? I think it's because there's a very concrete sense in which when a brain surgeon goes to work, they're going to work literally on the matter, the psychological material of the brain organ, and this is kind of a big deal. Like, you don't want a brain surgeon who's, just, an apprentice. seem to understand instinctively and intuitively that what a brain surgeon is doing is not reducible to psychology, is not reducible to technique of a scalpel, is not reducible to how much they know, but that ultimately what's going to happen is someone is not just going to live or die, like maybe a heart surgeon, but someone could be changed in a deep, material way as a result of undergoing a procedure like brain surgery. So a brain surgeon we take to be kind of these rare unicorns that do this rare unicorn work, rare in the sense that it affects our being and becoming. I'm not sure why, if that follows, we shouldn't treat teachers and educators with the same exact sense of significance. Because whenever a student, a child, enters into our care, we may not use scalpels, I hope. Well, maybe in high school, right? You know. But the risks are the same in many respects. And the demands are the same. And we can't sell those off through knowledge acquisition or learning. There has to be something deeper, something more mysterious at the core of education. And a Catholic worldview, as we've heard, has that depth, has that blurry need of Windex revelation that we heard about. And that's, I think, one of the things that makes the very idea of education within a Catholic worldview potentially countercultural. Because for a Catholic educator, one has to accept the major premise that what is at stake is not just what we learn, but is ultimately who we become. It's not just a question of what, and I know I say what weird, so you can laugh, that's okay. It's a question also of who. And this distinction between the who and the what brings us to possibly the main thing I suppose we share in a theological sense, which is the who that is not just this theoretical human person, but the who that ultimately comes to us in swaddling clothes and is ultimately wrapped in a same symbolic cloth and put into a tomb. And then 3 days later, the tomb is empty. This isn't just about being versus learning or knowledge or whatever like that. Ultimately, there's, at that depth, there's this sense of wonder and awe that we find within the stories that we share, that we tell each other. We've got some great story material from here. But Scripture is also filled with some of these stories. One of my favorite stories is the woman at the well. Y'all know this story? The woman at the well. So Jesus is a Jew. We know that, hopefully, right? Okay. Jesus, a Jew, sees a Samaritan woman at a well. And within the geopolitical situation of his time, they weren't really to speak to each other, especially considering the fact that he was a man and she was a woman. Yet Jesus speaks to her. And he asks her if she would get him, if she wants water. And she says, obviously I'm at a well. And she even comments and what are you doing here? You don't even have a bucket. It's kind of an interesting exchange they have. And at a certain point, Jesus tells her something that almost sounds ridiculous, where he says, yes, but you don't understand. I'm not offering you water, like well water. I'm offering you living water. What's the difference between water, well water, and living water? Is there anything to the difference between well education and living education? Well, I don't have an exact, I'm not a theologian, so I won't play that out. But I do have a sense that if that distinction between this well water and that living water, it leads me to wonder about the difference between things that are disenchanted and things that are enchanted. And I think this is the capacity of the Catholic intellectual tradition to provide an enchantment to our understanding of education. It's not just, this is really serious, oh my gosh, don't screw up, you're like a brain surgeon. That's kind of like, that would, I think, give the wrong message. it's ultimately that there's so much to be wondered and awed by within this particular school that we share called Catholicism, which, by the way, is a school that is wider than itself. This idea of the soul, for instance, is not necessarily an idea that comes directly out of, like the early church fathers didn't just make it up. They borrowed a great deal of it from Greek thought, and the ancients, Augustine, for instance, is a Neoplatonist. And so we see the ways in which the school of thought we have isn't even reducible to itself. It's even bigger than what it is, which I know is a weird thing to say, but it's so big it can't be contained simply by its own identity. And this, I think, is a really important lesson for us as Catholics, where it's tempting sometimes to give that narrative of, everything is bad, people aren't being Catholic anymore, we're at risk of, so let's defend ourselves as an identity group. Right? Let's play some religious identity politics. I think a Catholic worldview provides a very concrete example of why one doesn't need to go into a state of political anxiety over the state of the church. The one person who I will name drop here, I know I've done it already, but I often contradict myself, was Augustine. Augustine of Hippo. I consider Augustine to be, I just love Augustine. He wrote probably more than anyone else in the early church. And he wrote so differently from one thing to another. But the book of his that I truly love the most is his book, The Confessions. Confessions of St. Augustine. We would think that Augustine, the great doctor of the church, writer of the Confessions, one of the greatest pieces of literature in the history of all literary works within mankind, within history, we would think that someone like Augustine would have been an amazing bishop, which he was, of Hippo. And maybe he was an amazing bishop. But there's another side of the story. Augustine was the last bishop of the Diocese of Hippo, because Hippo, and North Africa in general, was overrun by the Vandals. And as he wrote his City of God and his Confessions, he wrote them as Christendom, as the church was crumbling in North Africa in a way that it hasn't recovered from since to this day. What do we think of that? Is Augustine's, as an educator, does he fail? Is Augustine, did he let his church slide into ruin as he wrote his books? Was he irresponsible? Do we think that maybe he should have spent a little more time being a good administrator instead of doing what he did? Maybe. I mean, I'm not a classicist or a historian. I don't know the exact answers to those. But I do know that what he left behind was more than just water. It was living water. Augustine refused to be seduced by the immediacy of temporal politics. He refused to let himself be taken away from his charism because of fear or because of anxiety. Augustine, one of the greatest of our inheritances within this Catholic intellectual tradition, himself doesn't just give us great books, and I think they are great. He also gives us a sense of confidence. And to me, this is a sense of confidence that's both puzzling in some respects, but it's also something that I think educators can be empowered by. So, what is there to fear? Augustine asks this question in the Confessions. He actually asks it over and over in many ways. And his answer is that the only thing there is to fear is the fear of the kind of fear that itself is misplaced. What he means by that is something like, has anyone here watched an infomercial? I know on TV, I'm not Canadian, so do you guys have infomercials? Do they exist? Yeah. Do they usually do the thing where at the very beginning, they start by introducing you to a problem you didn't realize you had? Right? So at the beginning of an infomercial, they say like, have you ever tried to cut a carrot? And you're like, yeah, okay. And then they show you an image of someone cutting a carrot, and they're like slicing off their hand, and they're like, and it's like, yeah, it's really dangerous to cut carrots. I mean, what's wrong with this world where carrots cutting is so ridiculously hard? And they're like, well, we have an answer, we have a solution for you. And they show you this very cheaply made device that's very kind of clever, and it slices carrots in, you know, a quarter of the time. And to entice you though, notice they don't rely on the quality of the product. They offer you 3 of them, and then 6, and then a really bad knife to go along with it, supposedly for when you want to cut a carrot, I guess, the traditional way. And then they make it easy for you economically, right? They offer you credit card payments and all this stuff. But this is the kind of fear, and this is the kind of situation that I think Augustine is pointing us to. It's the infomercial sense of fear, where people have convinced themselves of problems that may not in and of themselves essentially be problematic. We often allow ourselves, whether it's through media or through gossip or through whatever else, to become completely convinced and asphyxiated with fear over problems that we never sought to justify as being problems in the first place. There are narratives out there and worldviews out there, including the worldview that says that one should not have a worldview, that often create problems that then Catholics within their Catholic worldview try to fix immediately. But one of the more subtle ways a Catholic worldview can operate in many cases is by rejecting the basic premise that there is a problem, or that the problem, such as it's been presented, is actually of the kind of nature that it's asserted to be. What this means is that one can use the Catholic intellectual tradition as an excuse for a kind of therapeutic relaxation of sorts. When I read Augustine, I see anxiety, sure, I see lots of stuff, but I also see him saying things like, hold on, wait a minute, breathe, pray. Okay, now let's go back to this problem. So God, you are big, you are eternal, you are beyond being. You're the biggest thing I can't even imagine because you're that big. Yet you say in Scripture that you live inside my heart. How does something so big become so small? There's the question that Augustine raises, which is an interesting chestnut to puzzle over. But it's, to me, also the wit of that question. Augustine doesn't say, oh my goodness, God is big, but he's in my heart. This is a contradiction. It's probably going to ruin the church. If people find this out, it's so embarrassing. How can I fix it? No. Augustine contemplates and thinks and registers a certain kind of relaxation as he puzzles over essential and fundamental problems of the human condition. The problem of evil, sin, the will, all of these things. I'm not as interested today in sharing with you the concrete elements of this approach and like telling you you should read this book of the Confessions or this or that, whatever. But I do want to communicate with you as best as I can the difference in tone, the difference in pausing, the difference in wit between someone who is able to, like Augustine, think, and someone who can only react and kind of freak out all the time. By virtue of your baptism, by virtue of the work you're already doing, you have the right to not freak out. You have the license to think about the biggest things and about puke. And you can think about it all at, you could say, the same register. This gets us to one point before I move into some points with that in there. Truth. Catholic intellectual tradition, Catholic worldview, is at some level committed to the truth. It's certainly not committed to the truth. I mean, I don't think there is a worldview that could take itself seriously that would be committed to falsehood necessarily, right? But there's a difference between water and living water. which is to say, in many cases, we mistake a notion of truth that is, in many cases, actually quite foreign to the school of thought that we share. 1 + 1 = 2. Is that true, math teachers? Yes or no? I'm concerned. 1 + 1 = 2. Is that true? Yes. It's mathematically true. There is a proof that can work itself out, that is convincing on the most basic terms of logic, that has been durable, because it's probably not just true, but mathematically true, which means eternally true, conceptually true, regardless of what one thinks it's going to be true. If I jumped out of my hotel room floor, 14th floor, we all probably know that I wouldn't be here right now, right? That's kind of a morbid thing to say, I'm sorry. What I mean by that, though, is gravity. Is it true? Yes. It's real. It's not something that you get to, have an intellectual postmodern discourse about, right? And it's not an experiment you want to encourage people to, verify or falsify. It's just kind of true, right? It's scientifically true. It's empirically true. It's an observable truth. It's a truth that we can, we don't understand gravity scientifically, but we understand how it behaves in a way. We understand what force is and stuff like that. Whenever we say truth in the context of the Catholic intellectual tradition and in the context of a Catholic worldview, we're not simply saying well water, mathematical truth, logical truth, scientific, empirical truth. We're talking about a truth that ultimately conceals itself, that ultimately reveals itself in parable. We're talking about a truth that is often reserved for children, a truth that has been puzzled over for millennia. We're not talking about a truth that I can literally convince everyone in this room of fairly within, how long did that take me? 3-4 minutes? So whenever we think about imparting the truth to our students within a Catholic worldview, within the Catholic intellectual tradition, I think it's deeply crucial that if we want to have this sense of tone, this sense of feel that Augustine has, if we want to not have this anxiety, that we don't mistake truth with its scientific or mathematical or logical or journalistic derivatives. That we have a capacity to take very seriously the distinction between well water and living water. That we have a capacity to think about something like the soul without being confronted with cheap substitutes in the form of social psychology or whatever else people substitute that for. And it's my claim that the Catholic worldview we find within the Catholic intellectual tradition is countercultural for that reason. And that it has a very different concept of education at work, and it has a very different concept of truth within that work, and it's not something that you can just yell at people. If I yelled, and I won't do it, but if I just screamed at you 1 + 1 = 2, would I be lying to you? How many of you would walk out at minute 7 me yelling at you? How about earlier? Right? Because no one wants to listen to someone who's shouting some very kind of cheap sense of truth at them over and over. One, because it's actually not the kind of truth that we're really interested in. And second of all, because they're highly annoying and obnoxious. Right? And so, I think the arts have a capacity to do this. I think the sciences, I think all of the subjects have a capacity to engage with this search for a kind of truth that is not reducible to well water, that is not reducible to mere learning in education, and that has a sense of tonality, a sense of the difference between when my pickup is over here and my tone is all the way up and I go, or if I go, some of you are like, that sounds exactly the same. No offense, I hope you're not music teachers. But the point is that tone is different. Attack is different. If I'm going, and I'm just reaching in harder. But if I'm trying to deliver something aesthetically, to communicate, Maybe if someone's soloing, I want to just, because I don't want to get in their way. But maybe when they move out of their way and I want to kind of say something, I'll go and play something kind of weird like that, right? The point about it, though, that I'm making is that this aesthetic sensibility, all of you who are teachers, and hopefully everyone as educators knows matters, right? It's about your voice, it's about your body, it's about how you communicate. But not just how you communicate content, but how you communicate who you are. It's about communicating being at some level. Like, I have a story. I was in New York in November, and I was walking down the sidewalk, and I thought I saw someone working on a car, which was sort of nostalgic, a taxi driver. It was nostalgic for me because I grew up in a culture where people were like laying in their cars a lot. And so I was kind of like, look, imagine that. I'm walking lower Manhattan, and there's someone working on their car. This is precious or whatever. I walked up closer and I realized this gentleman wasn't working on the car. They were on a rug facing in a particular direction. And as I approached, I realized very quickly that this was a Muslim gentleman doing his daily prayer, facing my back. Without even thinking, without even having any sense of processing the situation, I just did this. And I did it sort of awkwardly to kind of say like, oh my gosh, you're praying here. I'm sorry, I'm not Muslim, but I'm Catholic, so I'll just cross myself, I guess. Now, I wasn't trying to enter into a prayer to Mecca. I wasn't trying to engage in a Quranic dialogue with them. I don't even think he saw me. But that was just my sort of reaction because this for us, or this for those of the East, is a way of being. And we present ourselves, we present our bodies that way. So I think we can all name and see different ways in which we communicate, and which we communicate something about the truth that's much deeper than just obvious things, or dogma, or catechism quotes, or motivational lines, or gotcha statements, or whatever. And that's what I want to engage with you here to end. I want to ask you to join me in song. This is a song I wrote in an album where I was trying to understand Augustine's Confessions through the medium of soul music. And as crazy as that sounds, Augustine as a Neoplatonist is a good candidate for that kind of inquiry. And this particular song is called Show Me. And it's where I tried to, in some sense, pray with and struggle with some of the basic prayers and struggles that I find in Augustine, especially as they surround questions of the head and the heart, the will and freedom. And the chorus sums up for me what my message would be. And it goes like this. It's just, show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me. Can you say that with me? Show me how to love. Show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me. One more time. You got a few notes off there. All right. So, show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me that jazzy All right, so I'd like to ask you to think through the lyrics of this song as an attempt to present not just a prosaic, but in some sense a poetic encounter with some of these questions in a different medium, and to pray with me this chorus, which just says, show me how to love, show me how to be, show me. Hopefully everyone knows who we're talking to, right? That'd be awkward if you didn't know that, but it's God, okay? All right, so this is called Show Me, and then as soon as we're done, we'll just dismiss after that. This will be our last thing. too much. Show me how to love. Show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me. You sound beautiful. Sing that again. Show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me. Force me into freedom. Free me from my will. I don't want as I want to. I'd rather have my will. Force me into freedom. Love me unto death. Fear of absent evil cannot give life breath. And force me into freedom, 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 freedom. But maybe not today. One more precious poison. Redemption undelayed. And force me into freedom. Only you abide. Only you are, you are, you are, you are all face and all love. Hey, show me how to love. So show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me how to love. Show me how to love. Show me how to be. Show me how to love. Show me. Won't you show me? Won't you show me? Won't you show me? Won't you show me?
I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of our colleagues who so bravely shared their stories. And of course, Sam Rocha for affirming what we do every day as Catholic educators in the framework of